Welcome everybody on this next episode of Ask Tom. And today we're gonna talk about updating JSON data. We did a lot on querying, JSON table, performance considerations, all that. But we never spoke about updates. So that's what we're gonna do today. And I'm very glad to have Josh here. So Josh is one of our key developers in the JSON team. He's worked a lot of time on XML. He's a XQuery expert, and his XQuery engines are used in various Oracle products. And he's worked on this update operator that we're going to present today. And he also did a lot of work on the simplified JSON syntax. So I think this is something we could be presenting to you in one of the next episodes here. I hope Josh likes it so that he comes back. Okay. So only one slide before we jump into code. So the SQL JSON standard that defined JSON value, JSON query, and JSON table, for example, did not define an update operator, unfortunately, yet. We are working on it, and once the standard has defined one, then we will, of course, jump at implementing it. So that leaves us three ways to update your JSON data as of today. The most obvious one is where you generate a new JSON on the client. Let's say you have a Java program that pulls out the data, modifies it, and pushes it back. We're not presenting that here. I think this is obvious how this would work, where you just do an update with a new JSON. The second approach, which Josh is going to talk about, is called JSON merge patch. That's based on a public RFC, and you use JSON to define the update. That has been documented in 19, so it's a relatively new feature, but to the best of my knowledge, we added it to 18 too. So it was added to 18, but not documented. But if you have 18 and not 19, you should be able to use it. And last, I will present how to use PL SQL to do the updates, where basically you use the PL SQL control structures, and we've added some JSON API to update your JSON. So with that, I would leave it to Josh to present JSON merge patch. And by the way, Blaine is not here. He couldn't make it today. So I will try to watch the chat. And if someone has a question, then it's my job to make sure we don't lose it. So if you have any question here, please paste it into the chat. And I will then ask Josh to reply to that. Cool, Josh, your show.
Thanks. Before I get going, I wanted to mention that the examples that I'm going to be going through are available at livesql.oracle.com. So if you go to this site and then you click on home, and it'll bring up a search box, and you can type in merge patch. And I think currently 3 different worksheets will come up. And if you pick the one that's authored by me, Josh, that will contain all the examples that I'm about to run. Okay, so merge patch is a function that takes 2 JSON objects as input and returns a new JSON object that contains a combination of the inputs. So the first input object is referred to as the target, and the second input object is referred to as the patch. And so in this particular example I have on the screen here, by the way, you all can see Live SQL window in a web browser right now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So the target object in this case has a single entry A equals 1, and the patch object has a single entry B equals 2. And if I run this, I get a result object containing both of those entries. The second example here is similar to the first. But again, the target has a single entry A equals 1. But now the patch has 2 entries, B equals 2 and A equals 3. And the purpose of this example is to show what happens when both the target and the patch have the same key, which in this case is A. And so if I run this, you see that the result object only has 2 entries. And for A, it kept the value from the patch, A equals 3. And so the kind of main use case for JSON merge patch is that you can use it to add, modify, and remove entries from JSON objects that are stored in a table. So with that in mind, for the remaining examples I'm going to run, I'm going to be using this zoo table. You may have seen this before. I think it's used in other live SQL demos for JSON. Okay, so this zoo table has 5 rows, and each row has a JSON object. And each object represents an animal at a zoo. So we have like a row for a dolphin, a dog, a cat, a giraffe, and a lion. So the first example I'm going to run here is going to use JSON merge patch to add an entry to all of these objects with a key of admission and a value of 2.75. And so the way it does this is it does a regular SQL update, and it sets the JSON column equal to the result of calling merge patch with that same JSON column passed as the target, and then a patch argument. So if I run these, you can see here that the table looks the same, except now all the objects have an admission entry. This next example is only going to update one of the objects. It's going to update row 4. It does that by using a where clause. And this time the patch is going to change the height value that exists from 4 to 5. So you can see here in the giraffe object, we have a height value of 4. And so this patch is going to change it from 4 to 5. And it's at the same time going to add an entry called notes with the value he bites. So if I run this, you can see the giraffe object down here, and it now has a height value of 5. And it has a notes entry that says he bites. All right. So you can also use merge patch to do relative updates. And by relative, I mean update a value based on a value that's there currently. And so you do this by using the JSON object function. This JSON object function constructs a new JSON value kind of dynamically. So in this case, I'm constructing an object with a key of species. And the value is going to be the uppercase version of the value of species that's already there. And so if you look at this giraffe again, you can see there's a species entry, and it says giraffe, but it's giraffe in lowercase. So after I run this, we should see giraffe in uppercase. So you can see here species for all these objects is uppercase, uppercase cat, uppercase giraffe, uppercase lion. Here's another so-called relative update. So in this case, it's only going to be updating the dolphin row. And it's going to be increasing the admission value by 40%. So it's taking the existing admission value for that row, and it's multiplying it by 1.4. And so now we see that the dolphin has a new value of 3.85, but all the other admission values are still at 2.75. Okay, so here's our first example of a patch that uses the value null. And based on what I've said so far, you might expect that this is going to set the admission entry in all of these objects to null, but that's not actually what it does. So merge patch assigns a special meaning to null. And that meaning is that it's going to remove the corresponding entry. So in this example, what it's actually doing is it's going to remove admission from all these objects. And the consequence of this is that you can't actually set a value to null with merge patch. So if you have an application that actually needs to distinguish between cases where a value is null versus when it's not present, merge patch may not be for you. So if I run this, see our table down here, and admission has been removed from all these objects. It's gone now.
Question here, if you use the empty string instead of null, would it still delete the key? So if you use admission : empty string, I guess not, right?
Right, it's going to set it to the empty string. So we can actually try that.
Yeah. So I think this semantic equivalence of the empty string and null is really an Oracle SQL oddity. I think even the SQL standard does not treat them the same, but Oracle for some reasons did. And for JSON, it's different. Empty string and null are different.
Okay. So now we're going to talk about nested objects. So I'm going to update the cat record here. This is kind of a setup here. So I've taken this cat object, row 3, and for the food entry, it's now set to this nested object. And the object contains 2 entries, breakfast and dinner. And so this is a setup for what I want to run next, which is to show that JSON merge patch can also do partial modifications to nested objects as well. And so here I've got a call to merge patch, and I'm passing an entry food that has a nested object in the patch, and it has an entry for lunch and an entry for dinner. And so what this is going to do is it's going to add a new entry to the nested object for lunch, and it's going to change the dinner entry from fish to chicken, and it's going to leave breakfast alone. It's not going to change it. And there you can see, so we've got breakfast as it was before, we've got dinner changed to chicken, and we've got lunch added. All right, so while merge patch can do partial modifications to objects, it cannot do partial modifications to nested arrays. And so if you want to update an array, you have to replace it whole value. And so the consequence of this one is that if your data has arrays or large arrays of nested objects, merge patch may not be for you. And so in this case, I'm going to update the line object. And so the line here has a food entry with a small array containing giraffes and meow mix. And I'm going to update that food entry to have a new array, which is the same, but also has the entry fish at the end. So if I run these, you can see that the line now has an updated food value. Okay, moving on. So bind variables. This is just showing that you can use bind variables with JSON merge patch to enable statement caching. So here I've got a query, and this might be more realistically in your application code, in your Java or Node.js code, but it's using merge patch to change the name value in a JSON object. And so you can see here that the value that you're changing the name to is a bind, and also the value in the predicate to select the object you're updating is also a bind. And it's setting these to Fido and 2. So it's changing the dog record to have a name Fido instead of Lassie, I think it was previously. And there it is. You can see the dog record with the name Fido.
So the benefit of this is that the query would not have to recompile if you change the name, but instead it would be using the old cursor. So it's much better performance there.
Thank you. So here are edge cases. These are not useful examples, but I just wanted to show you what happens. So merge patch is intended to modify objects, not arrays. So the question is, what happens if you use an array? I'll run these together. So in the first one, we've got
Hey,
the
Josh.
Yes.
Can I just interrupt you? We had one comment from Sven who said that there is no reason to run this update dynamically. He doesn't say why that is the case. Why wouldn't you run this update?
Oh, because the values are hard-coded? Is that what he means?
PL SQL does bind to. Do you see the chat? Josh?
Use PL SQL. Is JSON merge patch a pure SQL function? Can it be used in PL SQL to like var equals JSON merge patch?
Not a built-in yet, right? We can.
I don't know if they've added it to PL SQL yet. Do you know?
I don't think it's added as a built-in. I would be very surprised. But it is part of the PL SQL DOM API. So what I present later, these JSON element T, I do believe we can invoke merge patch on those. So you can use it kind of as a first-hand citizen in PL SQL. Josh, I was referring to the bottom, the question from Sven. And he says just run the update directly in PL SQL. The JSON merge patch would be part of the SQL, and PL SQL would bind new name and ID.
Yeah, so I guess the intent of this example is just to show using binds. You may not actually use it in PL SQL, but as I mentioned, you would maybe use something like this in your application code running outside the database.
Yeah. So then the update would not be part of PL SQL, but it would be part of Java, basically. So the host language would be different.
Right. But yeah, so I'm using live SQL, so I don't have Java access at the moment. Yeah. Back to these examples, they're just kind of edge cases. So typically the patch is an object, but if you pass an array, it's not going to raise an error. It's just going to return that array back. So here I have a patch of an array containing hello. And you can see the result. It just gives you the patch back. This is not a useful example, just an edge case. And if you have the target as an array, it's going to pretend you didn't pass that array, and it's going to treat it as if it were an empty object, and then apply the patch to that empty object. And so in the result of that one, we get A equals 1. So by default, the result of JSON merge patch isn't going to contain any insignificant white space. And I'm adding this string concatenation here, example equal. This is a little bit of a hack because this tool live SQL is automatically seeing JSON come back and trying to format it to make it more readable. And so I'm adding the string here just to trick live SQL into not knowing it's JSON. And so if you were using another tool, the JSON coming back from merge patch would look kind of like this. It would all be kind of scrunched together without any new lines or indentation. But if you'd like the result to be more readable, you can specify this pretty option. So if I run that version, you can see now the result has each entry on a new line, and the nested object is indented. And then the final example here is pointing out that merge patch has a default return type of varchar2. And if you're working with larger documents, you may want to return a lob type instead. And so you can use the returning clause to specify a return type other than varchar2. And so this, this function would be returning a blob. And live SQL does not know how to display blobs, I suppose, so it's displaying unsupported data type.
What happens if you do a toClob at the end, JSON merge patch, and just a toClob? Does this
like
work?
dot toClob?
I think so. No, it's toClob. It's an operator. toClob of JSON merge patch.
Like
to_clob. Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That works.
Yeah.
You could also put clob here, of course.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's more natural. Yeah. Right.
Okay. So that concludes my demo. So I guess with that, I will turn it back to Beda to talk about updates in PL SQL.
Good.
I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you, Josh. So I think the limitations that I learned are with arrays, that array updates seem to be quite limited. And you've shown how you do these relative updates using where you first extract something and then you build a JSON object with it and you feed that into JSON merge patch. That would work if you don't have multiple values, right? It's kind of depending on the JSON value, you extract one value and you feed it back, but would be hard to do array updates, I guess, right? If you had an array of numbers, you couldn't add one to them.
Right, with arrays, you have to replace the...
Is there any way to do, I'm thinking also if you have predicates, let's say you want to update the name of the, like a value depending on another value, that would have to be done similarly using JSON exists, correct? There's no way to do any sort of filter or predicate inside merge patch, right?
Right, well, the filters would be at the document level, right, at the row level. But you can't do like filter a sequence of values within a document.
It would not be part of a merge patch, but it would be using JSON exists or something.
Right.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, so let me see if I get this working. Yeah, I basically start exactly where you ended. So as everyone knows, I'm quite lazy. So I use the same examples here. I think it makes it easier for people to that I use the same example. So let's see how this works. I have to restart the session. Why does this not work? Let me just. Let me just get this working here. Okay, that seems to work on. Oh, it's because I exited the VPN, I guess. Okay, so I'm inserting the very same data here that we're using. It's the same zoo. And I also took this update using the JSON merge patch to turn the, so I think this is ID number 3. ID number 3, it's the cat, and that has an array. And I want to get rid of the array, so I turn this into an object, just to make the example a bit more complex. And let's see what I have in my data. So that is the data we're going to work, and it looks pretty similar. It's basically more or less where you left it. So what I want to show you is that some of these JSONs have a food item. Most of them have one, but it's not always an array. So for example, this has a scalar. This has a nested object. The giraffe is licking a food key value pair. And number 5 has our array of food items. And our goal is here to add some food to our to an animal. So we're doing this with PL SQL here. So what we added, it's actually quite old. This is 12.2, so this is nothing new. We added these built-in types that correspond to an object or an array or a scalar. And this is actually an in-memory representation. So if we add a function or a procedure, we receive our JSON as a serialized JSON, meaning a text. In this case, I've chosen the varchar because our records are pretty small. So this is our animal data is our input JSON, and food is the food item we want to add. And the function also returns JSON as a varchar. So here we are really treating JSON as strings, but inside our PL SQL, we instantiate our in-memory versions by doing an implicit cast. So this is a constructor. It gives us an instance of a JSON object type, and we provided the text JSON. So under the cover, we will parse it and provide an in-memory representation of this object. Then we extract an array. So here I tell it explicitly, get me an array. So this code here assumes that food exists and it's an array, and it is instantiated an instance of array type. And then we just call the append operation to add a food item to this array, and we turn it back into a string JSON by calling the stringify. So this turns it into a varchar. Stringify is kind of JavaScript inspired naming. I think the equivalent is toVarchar, and we also have toBlob and toClob if you want to turn it into such a data type. And then we return it. So let's just create this type here, or this function, and we gonna add a fish to our lion. Lions don't eat fish. This is an old example. Yeah, anyways. Should have changed. So this works. We see here that our food, we added fish there. Do lions eat fish? Josh, do you know? I mean, if they're desperate, I guess.
I don't know.
Cats do eat fish. So I don't know. That's a question for you guys there. So I expect an answer in the chat before this ends. Do lions eat fish? Let's try the same with 4. So let's go scroll back to number 4. 4 is our giraffe. And we see that the giraffe has no food. And if I run this here, it doesn't work. And we actually get some very self-explaining error message here. And the reason is that our assumption that animal object get array food succeeds was failed because this object does not have a food item. I could do the same, I think, if I do number 3. And my guess, it's also failing because this is our cat, and the cat does not have an array. It has food, but it's a nested object. So we need to handle these cases. You could call that dirty data, or I think the new word for dirty data is schema flexible data or schemaless data. So in our function, we want to handle all these cases. This might not be totally realistic because in many cases you can be sure that an object or a key value pairs of a certain type. But here this is just motivated for you to see how you can treat all these different cases. So the signature is basically the same. We pass in our JSON and the new item to be added. We instantiate our object, and the first thing we do is we ask our object, do you have a food key there? So if you have one, and if the type of it is an array, then we're basically good. Then we instantiate, or we set our food array to be the array called food. If our object has food, but it is not an array, it could be an object or a nested array or a scalar, well, not nested array, an object or a scalar, then we want to preserve that value. So first we do a get on the food, but we don't know what it is. So remember here we have get array, and below we will see functions like get number or get string. This is when you know the type of your value in the JSON, but get is something you can use if you really don't know what it is. And the return type is the element type. So the element type is the super type of object, array, and scalar. Everything is an element type. So that is very fortunate here, where we extract this value regardless of what it is as an element. We then remove our food array, or no, not our food array, our food key value pair, regardless of what it is. We create a new empty array, and whatever we had as our item in there, we put it into the array, so we preserve this. So now there is this other else branch, which was if our food object does not have any, or our animal object does not have a food item at all, then we just create our array here. So if we're here at line 95, we basically can be sure that there is an array called food, and it might be empty or there might be things in it. But then we just we append our new food item there, and we set it to be part of the object. And then we stringify it again, and we return. So let's run this. Just have to mark it, run. And now I was looking for something to add, a food that is relevant for all animals. I only found vitamins. Okay, so now well, I would expect to see something if we do this here. Okay. That's odd. Okay, I had to click it 3 times before it worked.
You know, I noticed it does that sometimes too. Sometimes it needs a.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. There's
Susan about it. Yeah.
Could always keep my blood pressure a bit high working with this tool. Yeah. So, oh yeah, I had crashes or that the session expired when I used some domain indexes and stuff. So I'm very careful with those. So this is our old value. So we see that our dolphin.
Sorry, Beda, to interrupt. We have a question. So Sven mentioned that he thinks we could have a better error message for the null pointer. And Eric's asking, is stringify just an alias for to_string?
I think it is, yes. I think it is. Okay. Oh, it's not in the documentation?
Yeah, he says it's not in the documentation.
Oh,
so we have an enhancement request for a better error message.
And toString is then the proper method. Actually, it should be called toVarchar, so I wonder we call it toString. I don't know. Mark Drake wanted stringify, so I added this, and that's what I kind of remember. Yeah,
that's what it's called in JavaScript, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Better error messages. Well, that's you don't like that one? Okay, we can think about this definitely. Right. So here we see our old value, where we have our food being the string fish, and it's getting turned into an array where fish is also being preserved, and we add vitamins. Same as I think for number 2. And the cat, this is where Josh added this nested object, and we see that food has an array and our nested object is there. And in the other cases, this is the case where no food item was present, so we add one, it only has the one item. And this was I think the only proper case where we started with an array, where we just got a handle to the array and do an append. Oh, stringify is inherited from JSON element T. So stringify is then documented, I guess. Yeah. Good. Okay. So what's shown here is that we use our update or our add food function in a select, so we're not changing any data on disk. But if I wanted to make the change on disk, I just embed this in a normal update statement. It's basically the same what Josh has shown. It's just instead of merge patch, we have our add food here. So if I run this, then the change is now actually on disk. So now I want to make another change here, and I also piggyback on the admission. So I'm adding this admission with $5, whatever it is, and I use merge patch just for the ease of use. Now we see that every object has an admission key value pair, and it's all $5. So in our zoo, you have to pay every animal separately. It can get quite expensive. So don't get fooled by the $5. At the end of the day, you spend much more. So Josh has shown how you basically extract the admission value. I think you used JSON value. Is that correct, Josh?
To extract the JSON value, I think I was using
the admission price. When you updated the price of the admission, you first extracted the price.
Right, I was using the simple dot notation, but basically the same as JSON value, yeah.
So we're basically doing the same here. I call this price increase. So this is a function. Again, we get our JSON as a varchar. We parse it. And then here you see we have this get number. So I can extract a field value. And I know it's a number. This is why I use get number. And that will return me actually an OR number. And I multiply it and turn it back. So this is the example how you could do a relative update using PL SQL. So if we run this here, we see now that the admission price has changed. So in this API, whenever you know the type of something, you can do get number or get string, get object, get array. But there are cases where you don't know what data you're dealing with. And I've created this very realistic example here where the function is called tell me. I pass it in some JSON, and it's just telling me what it is. So this is the purpose of this example is just to show what you can do with this API. So you understand if you do these updates in PL SQL, you can use the PL SQL program structures or control structures, if then else, and loops to do any update you want. You're basically not limited. It's not a declarative way of doing your update, but you actually have to code it. So this example is just showing you how you can use this API to do some sort of introspection. So since we don't know what our input is, we have to parse it as a JSON element T. So JSON element T is a static type, meaning there's no constructor. Instead, you use this parse method. So this gives you an instant of an element, and then you can ask your element what it is. So you can ask, are you an object? Well, if you are an object, then we do some downcasting as an object type. So this, I think, to someone familiar with object-oriented programming, this kind of looks intuitive, where you have a super type and then you can cast it to a subtype. So now we know that object is a object, obj is an object. So we say this is an object and these are the keys that exist. So we do get keys, which gives us the an instance of key list, which is basically a V-array of varchars. And because it's a V-array, we can easily loop over it. So we extract our key and we say, well, this is the key that we found. And then we asked for the type of this key. And if the type happens to be a scalar, then we can treat it as a scalar type and we can ask it, are you a number? And we can convert our scalar type to a number, or what you could do equivalent, you can ask the object, give me this field as a number. So you don't necessarily have to do this treat as scalar type. You can ask the parent object directly, give me this as a number. And then we print this, print the value. And this is only for is number. You can ask is Boolean, is string, what else is there? I think that's it for JSON. And the other case, if you have an array, we treat it as an array case and we print out the size of the array. And an exception handler is needed if we pass in an input where the parsing fails. So let's just run this. And let's do the simple example here where we invoke it on an array. So it's telling us the array is of size 4. So it took this branch here where it treated our input as an array and then gave us just the size, the array size. But if I invoke it on this object, then it's saying what you passed me was an object and it had this key. A was an object. Let me just put this up. B was an array. C is a scalar. And D is also a scalar, but we had our isNumber branch, so it knew that C was a number scalar, and it gave us the number here. And if I pass in some junk, then our error handler kicks in, and it's complaining that this might be JSON. So this example is to highlight that you can use PL SQL to really work with data that has a lot of variety, or where different fields may be of different data types, and in some cases that might be important in handling all possible update cases. Yeah, that was the part I wanted to present about the PL, or using PL SQL to do updates. It's basically setters and getters and some functions to do introspection like get type or has. Do we have any questions or comments from you, Josh?
Nothing from me. Looked it up. Cats typically don't eat fish. So we should fix that.
Cats don't eat fish?
Typically, no. Not
lions or cats in general. Isn't there a lot of cat food that has fish in there?
I don't know. My quick Google search didn't turn up that information.
So Sven says he doesn't find JSON serialize and JSON element T. It might be called toString, but it would really be a synonym. I'm just Googling for it. No, can't find it either. A few examples I find in the internet. Anyways, just imagine it said toString there. Okay, we got one new message. Okay. So we got one question from Eric, not present here, but I was just asking if it was equivalent.
That's the 12.2 link, so I guess it's possible it's on the 18, but we should check. I mean, it should be in the documentation.
It might also just be some sort of marked rate convenience function. That's fine. Yeah, we're good. Any more questions? So maybe people in the chat, have you experienced update cases in real world? Customers wanted to do some updates, and have you tried out anything like this, PL SQL or merge patch? You can also comment on Ask Tom. We're gonna upload the video and provide the links to the examples. And you can always ask questions on Ask Tom. And your example is already up, Josh, right?
That's right. You can search for it on Live SQL. Just search merge patch and look for my name.
Right. Josh. Can you maybe put the AskTOM Office Hours with the date in the title too? That's what I typically do. I can send you a link to mine, and I will upload mine also right after this.
Oh, you mean at the top of the script?
Yeah, somewhere if people use for AskTOM JSON that they find the entire series. We can work this off. We can work
sure.
Okay, so I don't see any more questions here, so I thank everyone for attending. Yes, my presentation will be in Live SQL, same as Josh. It's already made, I just have to click on making it public. Does JSON message also work on JSON that is stored as a blog? Yes, that does. The patch, can the patch also be a blog?
Yes, I believe it can.
Yeah.
So both arguments, and yes, the first argument can be a blob, and the second argument can be a varchar, and that's maybe the most typical use case.
Right. Okay, so if there are any more questions, just paste them or put them under the on the AskTOM page, and we try to get to them as soon as possible. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
All right, thanks, Beda. Bye.